Hey guys, welcome to my pedalboard walkthrough video. You might be seeing this from my channel on my walkthrough, or you might be seeing it
on my channel. I have a pedalboard walkthrough as well. So this walkthrough is gonna be the first session of our brand new tone course that we have spent hours and hours filming, breaking down our pedalboards, showing you how to dial in things from zero, talking about amps, how to pair amps together in stereo well.
And we cover guitars extensively as well. Like we grabbed, I think 20 guitars and integrated it into our pedalboards and even just broke them down individually. So there's a lot that we dive into.
Yeah, we teach you everything that we've learned over the past, 10 plus years of touring, playing live, recording, all in this tone course to hopefully accelerate your journey when it comes to finding your own tone. So before we dive into this pedalboard walkthrough, check out this video to see what you can learn in our new tone course. Your tone is almost like your fingerprint. It's very much an art form just as much as you're playing. Doesn't matter if you're a seasoned pro with a $20,000 guitar rig or if you are just starting out and you have a $300 guitar rig. The point of this course is not to just show you settings that you can copy and paste, but it's to teach you how to listen with your ears and not see tone with your eyes, because what you hear is everything. I've been asked for years to film a tone or guitar course and I never felt like the timing was right. For whatever reason, I always wanted to wait, whether it was my own journey and just still exploring, or I just wanted to feel very, very complete and thorough. When Kenyon and I have talked about it, we feel like we can offer something that is an incredibly complete package where we both feel that we can really accelerate your journey and shave off years of you trying to search and refine your tone and grow.
So across all of the different topics,
we cover the three main aspects when it comes to tone, and that is
guitars, amps,
and your pedalboard or effects. In this course, we have over 30 hours of material.
When it comes to pedalboards, we do full walkthroughs as well as dial our entire boards from absolute zero.
And we comment on it to let you get inside of our heads. What are we thinking when we're looking for good tone? What do we think good tone is based on our years of touring experience, playing live, playing in the studio?
We're gonna talk about signal path, stacking drives, modulation, delay, reverbs. We also grabbed a handful of iconic overdrives and just threw them on a stool and started dialing to figure out if we can make all of them sound good with our rigs. We're actually going to implement 20 different guitars
to show you different types of hardware, different types of pickups, the way they interact with our board and our amps, and how we might favor some over another, or how we might tweak our tone to work with a certain guitar over another.
And also just help you know what to look for when you're trying to buy a guitar.
In this course, we are using all real amplifiers, but if you have an amp sim or a digital amp modeler, all of these principles will apply to you and aid you in how to getting good tone out of those. In our amps course, we're gonna talk about what makes an amp good. What do we look for in our guitar amps? What do we want from them? How do you dial in a good tone and a balanced EQ?
We both separately dialed 6 different amps.
Low wattage amps versus higher wattage amps.
How do you make those dance and work well together? Then we throw them together and then we actually figure out if there's something wrong, how do we change that? What do we need to do to balance one side to the other? And of course, no amp course would be complete without just knowing how to mic it up.
And the different tones you can get just from moving your mic around and also swapping your microphone. We're gonna give you a breakdown on the differences in tone between a dynamic mic, a ribbon mic, and a condenser mic. We're gonna teach you how to isolate your amps properly, whether you're playing live to make your sound man happy, to isolate stage volume, or how you might isolate them at your house or in the studio.
Ultimately, when it comes to dialing in your tone for your style, there can really be a lot of individual little pieces. So by breaking all of these down, you'll understand more of what's going on. So when you hear something that's wrong, or when you hear something that's right, you'll know where to place your finger to figure it out and understand it.
We were super thorough with this tone course, and we think it's going to accelerate you on your journey for excellent tone. So if you want to check it out, head to tonefactor.co now.
All right, welcome to our first session with Tone Factor, covering all things with pedal boards and dialing amps and just kind of making this whole world work and sound really good. So for the first part, we're actually going to be doing a full pedal board walkthrough of my pedal board, and then David Hislop is going to do one as well. And so we will have both of those available for you to see. The first thing that we're going to do from top to bottom, just run through every single pedal and then just kind of showcase what I use on a regular basis. And then after that, I'll kind of be walking through the actual tone course teaching section and pretty much turn every single knob to zero, redial the whole board from top to bottom and arrive back at the same point, or maybe even at a better point that feels even more inspiring. So let's dive right in. We're gonna start with what's actually underneath the board, kind of powering everything under the hood, and then flip it back, throw on the amps, and then get to playing. All right, so first things first, and it is actually an extremely important item, and that is Pinstripe's multi-buffer. So that is the first thing that my guitar goes into, and I'm actually going out of output 1. So there's a difference between output 1 and 2 here. Output 2 is a Jensen transformer, and output 1 is just kind of whatever normal tech he's got going on. And it sounds a little bit fuller to me. Jensen transformer output 2 is like 0.5 dB quieter, and it's got a little bit more of a chimey top, and it sounds really good, but generally live, I've been enjoying using output 1. It just feels and sounds a little fuller to me at the moment. And then so I'm using output 2 to actually go to my tuner. So that is the first thing to note with this. Also, I mean, as you notice, there's some incredible cable runs. This was David Palaio's handiwork. It looks incredible. He's an incredible builder, so if you need a good pedal board build, he can do that. And the next, as you can tell, there's a bunch of Strymon power boxes. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. I have 3 Ohis and then 1 Zuma. And one of them has the ability to actually swap, you know, voltage from like 9 to 12 to 18. And I actually have my volume pedal on top side set up to actually be controlled by that, because I think it can go up to like 15 volts. It gives it a little more headroom, and then we'll talk more about kind of the difference that can make, but I'm just running it at 9 volts at the moment. Then as you can see, I've got the TX-RXS output here, which is Pinstripe's output like long line box to go to your amps. This one in particular is actually a Cat 5, really bizarre. I'll say this just as a disclaimer, you don't need that to sound the way that this sounds. It is cool and it helps simplify, you know, XLR runs and all that. It's a 150-foot Cat 5 cable. Sounds awesome, works extremely well. It comes with little adapters that actually branch off of the Cat 5 into 2 XLRs if you need it. But from like a studio perspective, that's what I'm running right now. It's just one single cable run all the way through to the amps, and it's pretty cool. But he's got the Jensen transformers out in this, and I can go 1/4 inch out if I need to, but then I can use the Cat 5 to actually do the long run to the amps, and it sounds really good. It's a really good sounding box. Another thing to note too is just like his ohmage out. That's kind of one of the key things that he was really intentional about, which plays a big part in the tone. And so there's some units out there that actually run the ohmage really high. I believe ohmage is the right terminology, but it runs it really high and can actually squeeze the tone and actually make it a little brittle. So how he set this up was really specific to make the tone feel really big and be under control. And then after that, I have the Chase Bliss MIDI box. This is just a simple box that allows me to shoot MIDI to all my different MIDI capable pedals. And this one I needed because it has the 1/4 inch out MIDI TRS, I believe it is, to go to my Meris Polymoon, which has to have a 1/4 inch for MIDI. But I think like all my other pedals are the 5-pin. So that's what that is. And then you notice over here, there is a Audition box. This is from Creation Music Company, the same that my board is here. This is their Aero Series board. This Audition has been super helpful because it's hooked up to my RJM Mastermind. And I do have it set up to actually audition. So I can actually just go, you know, send and return here, and just 1/4 inch out, go into a single mono pedal, and then return back into here. And then I have it set up on a single button that I can open that loop for that audition. So I can just throw any old pedal next to my board and then try it out quickly that way. Super cool. The other thing that I'm actually utilizing the other 2 inputs for this here is I wanted to have a break, a stereo break in my chain. So after my RJM, that's my last mono out sort of pedal, then goes into all of my stereo effects. I have my left and right. Traditionally, it's just my mono cable that's going into this box. And then the first thing that it goes into is the microcosm, the hologram microcosm. And so if I want to, I could technically audition a stereo pedal. I just pop out this cable, which is my last mono cable, and then I can go into the input of any stereo pedal, and then stereo out, and then I can actually go stereo into my left and right, which then goes to my microcosm. And because I can go into the global settings and actually change from, you know, mono or stereo input, I technically have this little interface there where I can choose whether or not I have this, you know, little section be a stereo receive or mono receive. That also works great like if I'm trying to send audio out from my DAW and I XLR out of it, I can actually, you know, go from XLR to 1/4 inch into this. I can go into my microcosm, I can change the pad from line to instrument or other way around. And then so it kind of makes it, you know, able to receive that computer, you know, DAW information. and it does all of that for me there, so I don't have to have all this other fancy tech to do that. And so it's just been a really convenient feature if I want to audition a stereo pedal or actually run stuff from my DAW through my whole stereo wet effects section. Very cool. And then I also have my Xotic Super Clean here. So this was, I had before a Vertex Boost, and it was a bit chunkier, and I still wanted the clean boost because it was still really useful. This was the only place that I could find to fit it. So the front face of it is actually peeking through the little gaps in my board here, where the actual control for the volume knob is peeking on the top side and the actual foot switch portion is peeking out through the bottom here. It's always on and it's controlled through my RJM, but those little necessary parts are peeking through if I need it. So that's what that guy is there as well. So that's everything under the board. That is everything under the hood, powering the entire top side. And it's worth mentioning too that Creation Music Company has feed extension for his boards. They were good enough for all the power and everything, but it wasn't tall enough for the Pinstripe units because those Jensen transformers are a little taller. So I had to go to Ace Hardware, get slightly longer screws and little little spacers to put in between the feet to make it just I think a 1/4 inch longer or something. And then I was able to fit the Pinstripe units. It's worth noting because I'm sure a lot of you guys are going to be getting boards like this or have boards like this. And if you're considering Pinstripe, it can work. You just got to get slightly longer screws. He does have a version 2 that I'm not sure if it's actually going to come with slightly longer screws. If not, I'll tell you, John, try to get some just slightly longer screws for these Pinstripe pedals. You guys should work together and make some awesome stuff together. But John at Creation Music Company makes incredible stuff. My board before was pretty heavy. My case before was pretty heavy. He made me a custom case with a nice telescopic handle. I swapped over to this Aero Series board, which is made of a nice metal, but it's flexible and light. And I literally lost 8 pounds just from swapping over to this, which is kind of crazy. So his stuff over there is made really well, and I would highly recommend it. And obviously, like I was saying, this Audition is from there as well. He's just kind of got all the sort of knickknacks that you would need to make a pedal board great. But that's everything underneath. All right, so now it's time for the fun part, and that is the actual pedal playing section. So like I mentioned, the first thing that I'm going into is the Pinstripe multi-buffer, and I'm going out of output 1. It just feels a little fuller to me. Without the compression on and no always on pedals on, this is just kind of the core tone by itself. And just a reminder, we're going into a JMI 36 and then a ProSonic, Fender ProSonic. Pretty simple, it's just a kind of a warm tone right off the bat without any of the other pedals on, but really simple. So a lot of the other things like the compression and actually a certain always on pedal that I've been introducing lately make a big difference as well. But all that to say, that is kind of the core tone with nothing on and just the multi-buffer. So next is the compression. So you'll see that it says the Creed, and that was actually a pedal that a buddy put together for me named Matt DeLemus. And basically we house 2 tone press compressors into one enclosure. I just like the tone press a lot. It's very simple. The attack and release on it feels so tasteful. You don't have to change it. You can't change it. And so this compressor just feels great. It feels very alive. And it doesn't duck my signal a ton when I dig into it. So it just feels so versatile. It's also a parallel compressor, so it does a really good job keeping the clean unaltered guitar tone intact and then mixing in that compressed signal. So it feels really musical. So anyways, from just clean tone like this to compressor on. Just feels really nice and big and full, and it's not really altering the tone a ton either, so it's kind of, it's a really nice musical compressor. In the past, the way I used to set compressors was different. Lately, I've been kind of boosting the volume a little bit, which we'll dive into that more when we get into the actual instructional section. That is just kind of the simple compressed tone right there. Really nice, really big, really inspiring. So from there, I also have a secondary one in there, like I mentioned, and that is just basically with the purpose in mind that I can swap to a different set of compressed settings really quickly, and I don't have to like lean down and start turning knobs and all of that. So that's what this section here is. And you know, if you can see these knobs here, this one is nearly maxed out. This is the sustain knob on the tone press, and this is the blend. And so all of the settings are just a bit higher. So if I go from the, you know, the setting I was on before, and then I swap to the other one, it's really nice. It's really cool sounding. It's got like a really round snap to it, and it kind of almost brings out a little bit of harmonic information. I mean, it's just compressing and squeezing so much. And it works really great for slide as well, which I'll showcase more later on. But I mean, even with like just dry, if I have a slide on, you really hear it catch and squeeze all of that. You have to work way less hard whenever it's pushing that hard. So that's a quick idea of that. And then after that we have Pog 2, which I think most of you are familiar with at this point, and it is Electro Harmonics octave generator. And this thing sounds great. I've tried a handful of other ones briefly, and they do a pretty good job, but Pog, and Pog 2 specifically, is just so, like, the way that it tracks is really nice. Its immediacy is really nice. And you can even kind of play chords on it, and it tracks all of that really well. The biggest feature, though, is the fact that it has the low pass filter. So being able to actually roll off some of that harsh top end is usually like the worst culprit of a lot of these octave pedals. So for instance, if I turn that on, if that's wide open, you kind of hear that sort of crystally harsh thing. So that's one of the biggest things that I love about this little low pass filter on the Pog 2 and why I just can't get away from it, let alone it's obviously got the presets as well. But all that to say, you know, it's just a classic sort of Pog. Let's just quickly turn on a couple of effects here, and then kind of, this is like one of my most go-to settings, which is just a gentle single octave up, and then, you know, no octave down, no boosting volume or anything like that. Sweet. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. It's just a really nice sounding octave. And then I do have some other settings on there that I use fairly regularly as well. Just, that's like my most common go-to. The other ones that I've got in here are like an octave lower. You can kind of hear it's kind of like out of the way. It's not like a really obvious predominant one. So that way it's like if you're playing a lead up high and you just need it to kind of have that lower lift, then you've got it there. And then after that, I've just got one that basically does an octave low and an octave high, because obviously that sounds really cool and big if you're doing a big lead or something. So So just kind of like a fun, you know, it's not something I'm going to use all the time because, you know, I'm not always looking to just like cover all the octaves, but it's there, you know, and that's what I love about the Pog 2. It's got some presets and it tracks really well, and I can cut that top in and all that kind of stuff. So it's just a great pedal. All right, and then after that, we have the RJM Mastermind PBC 6X. This is probably one of the most important pedals to me. I use it differently than other people. It's very important to me because I'm doing a lot of MIDI, but not in the way that everybody would think. A lot of guys will be using like presets and songs and all of that, and I'm literally using none of that. I'm just using it as an absolute glorified looper, like giant looper. And it's great because everything doesn't need to be in the actual signal path or like loops. Like all these MIDI pedals are not in the loops, but since they're MIDI controlled, you know, I can turn them on and off. I can access different banks and presets and things like that. And if they don't have, you know, a nice helpful user interface on the front that tells me, you know, what preset I'm on, I can at least know what I'm on here. And I can label like 1 through 8 presets. And then I can go and see and name them and be like, okay, this is preset 7, which is this thing. So it's so helpful for that. I have a lot of pages of things like tempo changes, MIDI clock, all of that kind of stuff. So I can change it all on the fly. And then I've got, you know, Timeline, Big Sky, Mobius, Microcosm, Polymoon, all of those have different individual preset pages where I can access and just go grab things. If I'm like, you know what, I want this right now, I can go page over and I can get it. So very useful, but a lot of that will be covered later on in some of the other sessions. There'll be like a very extensive breakdown of that. And then we will also likely have sessions where we'll actually break down some of the actual setup and kind of MIDI routing and how to actually make yours do the same thing if that's what you're interested in. So the first pedal that we're actually going to take a look at, it's labeled here, it's the Storm, and it's actually labeled as number 5 because technically in the loop it's number 5, but you in the Mastermind PBC 6X can rearrange digitally where your pedals are, which is extremely useful. You can do it when you USB in, but you can also do it just by holding the 2 global buttons here and then going in there and just moving stuff around. So useful. Especially whenever you want to hear something before or after, certain drives. So anyways, the Storm is first, and that was for a specific reason, but we'll explain kind of like, signal path and reasons why for drives later on in the session. So the Storm, it sounds like this. I've got it dialed as kind of the same way as my compressor, my dual compressor, the super squash setting, because I really like the way that it did it. It brought out a little bit more saturation and kind of harmonic elements. So clean tone. And then the Storm. I mean, it's a really pleasant sound. There's a lot of other ways I've used it in the past where it's just adding some like grit, and it's almost like a big boost before drives because it like kind of compounds really cool with drives. But I've just gotten so attached to the way that sounds with like a little bit of reverb, a little bit of delay. Let's actually add like a bigger sort of cloud verb or something, and then kind of use that sort of super squashed effect. So as you can hear, it's really musical. It really forces those delicate clean notes forward, and it's so inspiring to me. Once again, I can accomplish that with my dual compression, but it's just not as big in comparison with the way that it stacks on top of that compression. It was just really inspiring to me, so I've been using it that way. Here's an example of like the super compressed side instead. So as you can see, it's so much more forward, it's so much more alive, and I love it for that reason. So it's sitting early in my chain, and it's first before all the drives because I kind of want it to act like my compressor is in that moment. So that's kind of how I'm using that there. Next in line, I've got the actual Schaefer replica. This is like the original Schaefer replica classic. And I say that because they have one right now that is the classic, and it doesn't quite sound the same as this original one. This original one had a way that you'll hear in a second of the way that it EQs, the way that it lightly compresses. It feels very musical to me. I keep using that word musical with pedals, which is important because we're playing music and we want to be inspired. And this just gave me something that felt rich and tasteful for my kind of humbucker thing that I'm doing. So just to give you an example, I'm running it really clean. It can be run more aggressive, and I'll just kind of like turn it up a little bit and show like the two sort of categories I like to run it in. But right now I have it like barely above unity. And then without it. You sort of hear that like little sizzly grit on top, and then that compression, the way that it snaps, the way that it kind of cleans up lows and everything. It's just like, oh, what's not to like about it? So another way that I like to use it is just, I just crank up that input just a little bit, which kind of gives it a little more drive, leans into the amp a little more. It's such a good sounding drive. And it's extremely transparent. You can crank the input on it, lower the output a bit, and it just, so all of the Solodallas pedals have a certain grit to them. It's extremely tasteful, and this one in particular does it so well. Side note, it's worth noting, they are currently in the process of actually redesigning this pedal in a smaller enclosure, one that they will currently offer, and it will actually have a tone knob on it as well. So be on the lookout for that. That's inbound. It's just not quite out yet, but that's what you're gonna wanna be waiting for. Then after that, I've got the Overdriver. This is an incredible pedal. A lot of these are actually older pedals. A lot of like hand-wired point-to-point sort of situations here with a lot of these pedals. I'm not intentionally trying to gravitate towards that, but there's just some of these that do such inspiring things with the way that their EQ works and compression and stuff that I keep gravitating towards them. The Overdriver in particular is just what it does to the mid-range is just so helpful for me, and the way that it breaks up along with that is perfect for second gain stage for me. It sounds like this. Let's throw on like a little bit of wet effect and hear that as well. The thing that stands out to me immediately about that and why I love it so much, like you heard the note the whole time, there's a lot of wet effect there, but what it did to the top end, I could still hear it. What it did to the low end, it never got muddy. And also the way the Overdriver in particular stacks with the Benson Germanium boost, the textures are kind of just unlike anything I've ever heard. It's one of my favorite combinations. So a quick example. Add a little bit of wet effect. With that set of kind of like drive boost combo, there's so much ear candy. I love the sort of Germanium sound. I don't even know how to describe this sort of like fizzy grit that it is. Granted, the Germanium boost is also based on Benson's like fuzz circuit and all of that. It's just a boost format. So you're kind of getting some of that fuzzy characteristic. And so all that to say, when pairing it with the Overdriver, like on that rake there at the end, you hear so much like saturation. It's so interesting to listen to, and the way that fills in a set is so fun to me. So I particularly love that combination, and the Overdriver just delivers so much of that. But the Overdriver can also do a lot more. I've got it run pretty transparent, but whenever we start doing the sort of whole tone dialing section, we'll really push that thing to its limits and see what else it can do. All right, Mustang. This one I'm really excited to talk about because this has become, it was always something that I loved and was so interested in, but it's become increasingly higher up on the list of importance to me the more that I play on it. And it's funny because the only way I'm using it right now is actually just an always on preamp. I haven't had it on yet since I've started all of this, but I'll turn it on now and you're gonna hear just how subtle it's actually doing something, but it makes a huge difference in the long run. So here's clean tone. And then Mustang. It's extremely subtle. If you really lean in, what you're gonna hear is a subtle lift in the harmonic, like sort of rich top end, as well as it's a little fuller. It's reacting to my compression a little bit more fuller as well. It feels more interesting. It feels more inspiring. And so the thing is though, it's like right at unity. It's not lifting the volume, which is great because technically I have this positioned after my drives. And there's a really specific reason for that, which I'll get into more later on. But it's before my boosts because I didn't want my boost to push into it and accentuate the Mustang. I wanted the Mustang qualities, but yeah, I just didn't want to blow out the pedal. So I'm getting this like richness, I'm getting this reaction in my compression that feels really nice. So it's extremely subtle. Now, the way that the drives go into that is where you'll hear more of a difference. So let's do Overdriver. So you start to get a little bit more saturation. You start to get a little bit more top end sizzle and clarity. As an always on, it starts to add some fullness, but then yeah, when the drives come on, it starts to add a little bit more intrigue to the saturation because of the sort of preampy things that this is doing. Because the Mustang is modeled after a 1073 Neve. Now, I have the tone knob all the way down, and so the few ways that I'm using it at the moment, it's a subtle lift. But if I turn the tone knob up, it's basically a saturator. Like a harmonic, like top end saturator. So I can literally just inch this thing up a little bit. So right now it's still, you know, at bare minimum. See right away, that top end lifted a little bit and we got a little bit more like saturated crunch. Back down again. I mean, that's just immediately fun to play to me. It's incredible. I barely turned up the tone knob and I got all this saturation and like lifting the top end. This tone knob is just so weird because it doesn't generally actually really heavily increase the tone or the top end. That's why it's that saturator. And so that's kind of the fun intrigue to me about this pedal and why I love it so much. I have so much power over one single knob and what that does to my tone. So at the moment, we'll keep it as an always on, really subtle, clean lift with that tone knob at minimum. And that's a fun little region for me. So a moment ago when I was pushing a bunch of buttons here, you know, you saw me pressing this one here. This is the Benson Germanium boost. So whenever it got even bigger and got even grittier, that's what happened. I pushed that right there. And so that's actually the next pedal in the chain here. And that's the Benson Germanium boost. It is set, you know, after all my drives. And basically, you know, if I were to just use it and turn it on and off, this is what it sounds like. So let's start clean. So you can kind of hear there's like a little bit of compression going on. There's a lot of nice texture going on. This is one of the most inspiring boosts I've ever used, and I can't stop using it. I'm not going to stop using it. It just pairs so well to every drive. The thing that I noticed right away when I swapped over to this pedal was a lot of the other like typical JFET style boosts just kind of made things feel like a wall of sound. And this one, adding that little bit of compression actually tightened the sound. And at first it caught me off guard. Like I remember when I first plugged into this pedal, I was so excited. And I strummed on it and I was like, this isn't what I thought it was. Oh, do I like this? And then in the end, I wound up falling in love with it because suddenly my sound got a lot tighter because of the way that it compresses, because of the way it adds grit and everything. And it just like, it tightened my dynamics. It tightened my tone and sound and everything when I boosted and got really big for leads. So it's a huge deal to me using this boost. And so once again, you know, let's bring my gain stage 1 here, the Schaefer Replica Classic. Let's just do a gain stage 1, and then I'll just pair the Germanium boost with it, and I'll turn on some wet effects just to kind of hear exactly what it's doing. So simple, so effective. I mean, just a single drive, a single boost, and I can cover a lot of territory. Granted, it was a little cleaner. You know, I wouldn't necessarily lead line with that tone, but it's like I can keep, you know, certain things intact that I love about my first gain stage and just lift it like that with the Germanium boost. Such an awesome pedal. And then after that, we have the hidden but not forgotten Xotic Super Clean boost that is underneath. So if you notice, there is something peeking through here, and that is the Xotic Super Clean's little volume gain pot there. And that's the way that I access it. That's the only way I could actually fit it on this board. And I'm just still so glad that I was able to fit it at all, because to me, you know, I'm not always using the clean boost, but it's extremely necessary. Let's say I'm just, you know, clean tone and I just want a subtle lift. It's giving me just that. And let's say I am using my first gain stage and I don't want to send it, like sending it with the Germanium boost instead. Or the Super Clean instead. So, you know, this being the Xotic Super Clean with the white emblem, this one being the Germanium boost with the green emblem, you know, that's what you can hear there. And this one is just giving me a little lift. So it's like, it's hardly changing the image. It's just leaning it in to the amps a little bit more. And let's just say hypothetically, I'm just full sending it. I've got my Overdriver on. I've got my Germanium boost on. Well, I can turn on the Super Clean as well. And it just gives me a little bit more. I can just lean into the amps a little bit more. So that's why I like it. You know, it's giving me a lot of different options. It's kind of a lot of drives, it's kind of a lot of boosts. But practically speaking, if I can think of it, if I'm in the moment and I need just a little something or a lot of something, I literally have it all kind of at my disposal here. So that's kind of why I have all those. Sweet, next in line is the EB10. That is Walrus Audio's EQ pedal, and it's incredible because it has presets, which is so useful. I mean, pretty much all my knobs nearly get knocked when I'm putting it in my case and taking it out. So I'm always having to kind of redial things on the fly really quickly. Most of it I remember, but you know, it's never fun, especially with something like an EQ pedal. If there's a lot of finite changes or something on the EQ, and if all that gets changed, it's a bummer. So having presets, and it doesn't matter if the knobs get knocked, because all of this doesn't matter. It's whatever I saved it as in here. And it has the ability to, you know, low or high cut or boost. And, you know, it's 3 designated frequency ranges that they chose, except for the mid-range. On the inside, you can change little like trim pots and change where the mid-range boosts. But like a quick idea here. So let's just say, let's zero everything out. You know, this is what the mid-range sounds like. And like I mentioned, I changed the mid-range because traditionally I found that it only cut well where it started stock. And I went in there and I changed it so that I could boost it well if I needed to, so it felt like a little more rock and roll if I needed some more like actual helpful guitar mids. And then also there's a 10 dB boost on there as well that sounds like this. So it's there if you need it, which is really helpful. I don't generally rely on it as my, boost, but it's cool that it's there if ever I need it. The way that I primarily use it though is I have a baritone that I sort of modded. It's just a player telly from Fender. I threw one of their subsonic baritone necks on there, and I have humbuckers in it, which feels really nice and big. But the humbuckers are often too dark, and so I just use this EB10 to actually boost the treble, and it's great. It gets me in the territory that I need for that guitar to kind of fit the same general top end ballpark as the rest of my guitars, and I'll show you what it sounds like. All right, so this is that guitar, and it sounds really cool, but it's a little warm without the treble boost. Now, it does have a single coil split, which is cool. That helps it out a lot, but there is a specific thing about the humbucker thing that I actually like a lot. And so when I boost it with the EB10, it gives it just enough life. And if ever it has too much low end, it's so convenient. I can just go here and I can just turn this knob and I can just cut just a little bit of low end. And it just kind of keeps it nice and clear. So let me actually open that low end back up. Let's just give it like a little wet effect because that always feels fun. Let's just do Overdriver. And if I didn't have that EB10 on, so it just kind of gives me a necessary lift that I need for something like this. And as well as my other guitars, like if I just want a subtle single notch of a treble boost, I can get that just to kind of help lift it above. But that's generally how I use the EB10. So after that, then we just have a couple of utility items. Firstly, we have, if you've noticed, this little switcher over here, and this is what is actually controlling the page up and down on my Mastermind. And it's as simple as that. I've got, like I mentioned, like maybe 8 pages or so, and I set it up where if I click and hold this top one, it takes me to my main page where all of my drives are and all that kind of stuff really quickly. If I click and hold the bottom one, it instantly takes me to my tempo page where you can see the flashing tempo that I can just tap in, and I have it set up where I can quickly change from 70 to 90 BPM. You'll see that represented here. And then after that, I can actually just notch it down like this. If it's like 3 BPM, 4 BPM slower, I can change 0.5, really cool. So that's a quick access by holding down. Aside from that, I can just generally page up and down that way. After that, I've got an expression pedal here that it is set up to actually control all the pedals. I can just go in and press a button and say, all right, now you control the Polymoon, now you control the Mobius or something like that. But 9 out of 10 times, I'm actually using it to control the reverb mix on my Bigsky, because from a live perspective, that's extremely useful. I can like a certain reverb, but maybe it sounds too big. Like perfect example, my big bright cloud. Traditionally, it's a lot and it lasts a long time. So hypothetically, I can just go in here. If I've got like this, overdriver on, and I'm just gonna dig into a huge chord. It's really overwhelming. And then and I can just inch in as much or as little as I want. It's a feature that I didn't think I would keep on my board for as long as I have, but I have no plans to get rid of it because it's so convenient from a live perspective. So that's what that is. After that, then I of course have the Lehle volume pedal here. Before, for many, many years, I just had like a Boss, I think it was like H500 or something like that. It was just their passive volume pedal, and it was built really well. It lasted for years, but it just, you know, I needed to downsize and I needed to change some features. So the Lehle's done a good job. From a tonal perspective, it's actually interesting. I'm curious if you'll pick it up. I can go into my insert here and I can turn it on and off to actually control the volume pedal. So we'll see if we can notice a little tonal difference, but basically I kind of liked what it was adding, and it didn't feel like I lost anything by changing to it, and that's always a plus. So right now it's on. And then off. I mean, generally, you're not hearing a difference, and that's what a good volume pedal should do. So Lehle did a great job, and it's a nice, cool build where it uses like a magnet, and so there's like actually like no pieces in between that should break, so that's really cool. And that's what that is. After that, then the only other thing that I've got is the Audition that I mentioned earlier, which is just here on this left side, and I can do exactly what I mentioned, where I can just go over here and I can go to my Audition button and I can open that up and I can just put some 1/4 inches out and then back in, and it goes to this loop right here, and I can try something out that way, nice and easy. It also, as I mentioned, is the break in my chain from the last mono pedal to the first stereo pedal to the microcosm, which intros us into the stereo wet effects section. And so, like I mentioned, the way that you actually can get into there is you go to the globals, and let's say I want to, you know, put stereo in instead, and I can just go over here and I can say, all right, now you're stereo in, and that's how that's indicated there. And I can change it to like line level in as well instead of instrument level in, so it kind of just automatically pads for me. All very useful. But that's how I kind of utilize that whole section, that little stereo break in my chain. But actually showing the hologram microcosm, I have a page here that is just labeled microcosm, and then I can access with my RJM, you know, an A or a B or a C or D sort of presets on here, and I'll just kind of show what some of those sound like really fast. I have a sort of quick access, you know, turn on button from my first main page here. But effect number one, it's this weird sort of like, it's the tunnel sound. It's really weird. I don't really know how to describe it. It's just kind of an unorthodox sound, which is why I like the microcosm so much. To me, this is like my unpredictable machine that I don't know how to control, and I love that. It kind of keeps me on my toes, and if ever things are just getting too familiar and boring and I need to throw something off, I can turn on the microcosm and it does that for me. You know, it's a really weird effect to try to just kind of casually use. That's why it's just like, it's just something you can throw on that, like, when it's not on, it just adds this weird ghostly movement. And to me, a lot of the effects that I like to use are just subtle. Some of them are not as subtle, but the subtle ones mean the most to me because you can't always put your finger on what it is, but it's doing something that just kind of breaks the typical mold and makes you just go, what is that? And it just creates intrigue to the song. So that's a fun effect for me. And then of course, I've got some other ones in here, like they're more traditional hologram microcosm sounds that kind of do the cool glitchy octave stuff. And then there's this really cool function where you can just reverse it. And so I programmed it to be right there, and it just changes the whole feel of what that effect is doing. And then if I really want to, I could inch up my wet effect here with my expression pedal and just make it more drowned. So cool, so inspiring. And then I've got some more in here. It just kind of gets a little wilder as it goes on. So we don't necessarily need to tackle all of them, but let's just see what number 4 is, because I actually don't remember. That's right. It's like a really consistent pulsy delay type almost. And it's just whenever you start playing it and it just trails on, it just makes you start smiling. It's just fun. That kind of stuff, I love trying to fit it into sets because it makes me smile. Makes me keep wanting to do what we do, you know? It's so much fun. So the Hologram is a perfect machine for that for me. It's just wild, it's hard to control, and it brings out some really cool things. After that, we have the Polymoon. That one is fun and different as well. I'm actually pretty soon going to be moving this off my board, not because I don't love it, but just because I want to keep trying some new things. And the way that I've used the Polymoon is actually really fun. So traditionally, my favorite way I've used it is it's a ping pong, left and right, back and forth, and it sounds like this. Obviously with a little bit of reverb as well, but it's cool because the way that it kind of interacts with sort of like a percussive nature with your playing. It's a really like warm, soft sort of effect. But the moment that you actually add another delay like the timeline, which is a dotted eighth, very simple, very straightforward, and it sounds like this. It's just very storytelling. It's very interesting. That's a very simple way that I use it. And actually, one of the things that was really fun for me was one of the effects that I discovered on it is what taught me to look for a widening effect, because that's my preset 2 here. So it just makes things really wide, and it was a really unexpected effect to kind of stumble upon, but it's taking its like active phaser and just making it do this really wide thing. Very cool. Now this one was a fun one that I discovered and wound up putting it on the song Our King Jesus. And that was this weird glitchy high and low octave delay thing. And I very commonly use it with like slide and a lot of like reverb. So it sounds like this. So very cool, very big, very cinematic. It's a fun effect. The Polymoon it's also kind of an unpredictable machine. It's got some inspiring sounds. The only difficult part was just the user interface. It's kind of tough. Like, I'm always afraid I'm accidentally going to overwrite something and maybe not know how to get back to it. So it's kind of terrifying. But either way, I've loved this pedal for many years. Very cool. Then after that, we have the tried and true Mobius, which it's just a staple. It's hard to get rid of. I don't know why I feel the need to get rid of it, because I love it. But I just want to move on to things that are different and fun and inspiring, but I can't, because it just does the things that it does so dang well. Like, namely, the widening effect. This one, it's, I would say, number one reason why I can't get rid of it. That kind of, it's an effect that I was able to find in it after stumbling upon that Polymoon effect. It's just a little more under control, a little less wild, a little less unpredictable, and just more consistent. So here is, regular clean tone. And then I have a more aggressive version of that with a higher mix. It makes a huge difference whenever you have like a good deal of effects on. So let's do something like my Bright Cloud, and then let's hear it with and without it. So it's subtle, but it does things to like lift the tone, scoot it forward, or even just break it up from what another guitar player that you're playing with may sound like, and it just kind of adds some variance and width. It's really cool. So I love it for that. I do have a whole slew of other effects as well that are just very common and very nice, like this tremolo. And then I have a fast one as well. Very cool. One thing I actually love about the Mobius too is like you can set between like a sort of like mono tremolo to like half to full and get like just a huge width to the tremolo that just feels so interesting. Then after that, I've got like my go-to Light Destroyer that was used in Touch of Heaven. That's where that would be maybe commonly known. It's very subtle, and kind of like to my point earlier, love subtle effects, because the moment you start throwing on a lot of like reverb and delay, that subtlety adds a lot of intrigue and doesn't consume the tone. Super cool. After that, I've got my sort of go-to chorusy vibrato tone from the Mobius, which is what I used on Isn't He Beautiful? Very cool, love it. And then I've just got my shallow chorus effect. Super cool, super like light effect. And then I've just got like a heavier version as well. Yeah, it just sounds too good, man. That's why it's like I have a hard time wanting to get rid of the Mobius, because it does the effects so gently, tastefully, and doesn't feel like it's like kind of taking away from the tone. I think that's because of the way that the Strymons have, if I'm not mistaken, also like a parallel signal path within them, so that's like your untouched clean guitar tone blended with the full effect. So that's why like at noon, it's at kind of like equal parts guitar to effect. It's just love Strymon stuff. After that, we have the Timeline, which, I mean, as you've been kind of hearing on and off, is just a rock solid delay that you're all familiar with. And it sounds like this. This is my general tape delay. then I have a whole bunch of other delays as well that are actually, so this, this page on my Mastermind is actually labeled delay. You might not be able to see it there, but all of these here are actually set up to give me different delays. I can tap for one, like my general tape. I can click and hold for my modulated tape. I can tap for my quarter clean. I can hold for my slide eighth. It's cool. I have all of that at my disposal. And let's say hypothetically I'm just on quarter clean here, but maybe I don't want it to be quarters. Maybe I want it to be eighths. Click this button, changes to eighths. Click and hold, 16ths. Click quarter, click and hold, dotted eighth. Super cool. All of that is at my disposal. I love this thing for that reason. So anyways, that's the timeline there. And then of course, last but not least is the Strymon Bigsky. And once again, you've also heard this one on and off. A lot of sort of go-to settings like, my bright cloud, which is bright and cloudy. Similar to the delay, I have, I can click and hold. I got my dark cloud there. I can click. I've got a new one. Ooh, new effects. This one's called Dotted Dream. It's more like misty and kind of adding some like cool like width, and it's not too cloudy, so it's not getting on top of the guitar too much. That one's still in process, but all that to say, I can just tap and access a lot of different verbs. It's really cool. Traditionally, what I did in the past, and I still have the template for this on my RJM, I set this up the way that Pope actually set up the disaster area sort of setup for that MIDI controller that was the 4 buttons. I had it set up where it's like I could tap it up and down with these, or I could just click and hold to access, like hold, and that accesses the A side of both of these, Timeline and Bigsky. I can click and hold here and accesses B side. If I just tap it, it banks both of them up and down. So it's like, I kind of veered away from that because every single service, every single weekend, I was having to make sure that I prepped bank 0 through like 5 of each song. It's just kind of a little tedious. So now with this layout instead, I just have a page available of like, this song calls for this right now. Go over to this, click that reverb. And okay, the next song's BPM is 78. So I click and hold this, and I can either just click, quickly go to 70 and then just tap up to 78, or I could even just tap it into the BPM, and suddenly everything is locked into that. Super helpful functionality for the RJM with that. But that's kind of like a quick idea of everything on the surface of this board. After the Bigsky, it goes underneath and it goes to that TX-RX-S from Pinstripe, and that is the long line to the amps. So technically, with the RJM, starting from top to bottom, all the pages that I had, like I mentioned, is the tempo page. And as already explained, you have like the tap tempo here. You have a quick 70, 90 BPM change. And then I can change from 1 BPM like this up and down, or 0.1 up and down here. Very cool. Next, I've got my delay page, which already mentioned. I can access all of my delays by tapping or clicking and holding to get 2 different styles of delay. And then I can change from quarter to dotted to eighth and then 16th. After that, I've got my reverb page, and then have all those reverbs here. Unlike the delay one, it's just simply all a bunch of reverbs on here. Then I'm back to my main page, and that is what's actually labeled here, which is drive 1, 2, 3, and 4, which technically that is the Schaefer replica here on 1, Overdriver, the Storm is here, and then the Mustang is here. Boost 1, Xotic Super Clean. Boost 2 is the Germanium boost, and then EB10, which has a secret function of turning on the hologram when I click and hold that there. It's also worth noting that with the RJM, I programmed it in such a way that since I'm never stacking these two, I can just click and it automatically swaps between them. But if you notice with like drive 3 and 4, like the Storm or the Mustang, since they're kind of like not as detrimental to not stack with these, they don't get turned off, if I swap between these. So it's like these can stay always on, and I don't have to worry about that being changed. It's just these that I know I don't want to stack. I set it up to that they turn each other off. And then all the boosts also, all of these can just kind of turn on independently and stay on, which you would never want all of that on at the same time. After that, then I have my modulation page, which you saw me briefly navigate, which just has all of my Mobius effects. And same thing up here, it's just all nothing but Mobius effects. Microcosm, it's like all the different microcosm banks here, and then it has like that reverse change, and then it has like the hold function right there as well. Polymoon, same thing, a bunch of presets that I can quickly access there. Expression pedal, this is basically the page that allows me to press a button, and when I click it, it says Big Sky expression. And so now suddenly it's controlling the whole expression of that, not just the reverb mix. I can click over here and I can do timeline expression. Now it's controlling the expression of the timeline, so on and so forth. And it does that for all the other pedals. And then after that is just kind of some random pages that are just kind of some utility stuff that I don't generally utilize. So that's session 1, and that's covering my pedal board. Session 2 is covering David Hislop's pedal board over on his channel, so make sure you go and check that out. Session 3 is actually going to be dialing in these tones from top to bottom. So if that sounds interesting to you, or you were inspired by any of these tones and want to know how to do that, go to tonefactor.co to see that.